Hi everyone, we're just getting ready with the last few people checking in to start our presentation on high degree by research opportunities at the University of Sydney. Sean O'Reilly, I am getting it right, Dr. Sean O'Reilly, who looks after our recruitment HDR stuff here at the University of Sydney. As you check in and log in, if you can have a look down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat box. And we'd really love it if you could just know where you are at the moment, where you're logging in from. Just give us a We've got quite a lot to get through in the hour today. We've got people waiting for your questions, so please throw out those questions as soon as you've got them. We'll try and get to them as we're going along. If we find a question's too difficult or too detailed or requires a bit more of a more thorough answer, we'll ask you to send us an email and we'll give you the contact details at the end of it. Now, just a reminder that everyone can see your questions and that we will sometimes combine questions. If there are two questions that are very similar, we'll make a combined answer on those. It's now rolling around to 10 o'clock here in beautiful Sydney. Again, please find that chat box at the bottom of the screen and let us know where you're logging in from. We'll get going. All right, just so you know, some of you might have other interests. There are some upcoming webinars. Most important of those perhaps are the ones that are today, engineering, and then the undergraduate experience after that on Monday. So there's more opportunities for you to talk about more things. Remember that these are recorded. If you want to review them or you want to send a link to a colleague or friend who might be interested, that's all available for you. Now, the key question that everyone might be asking is, why on earth would anyone picture in the background? And that's got to be part of it, I'm sure, but it's not the most important part. A beautiful building does not a university make. We're just going to go through a little bit of history of the university and a little bit of the structure of it so you can have a better understanding if you haven't had the opportunity to visit us yet. One of the wonderful things about the University of Sydney is that it's situated in the city of Sydney. It's regularly voted as one of the friendliest and most livable cities in the world. And it's a home for a lot of international students. So you won't be the first international students that we've had. And it's, I would say, one of the most multicultural cities in the world. I'm fond of saying that people will ask me what type of food is Australian food? And my answer is always, what do you want it to be tonight? You've got all of those opportunities available. What did you have most recently that was different maybe?
I had some good Vietnamese last night, actually, yes, on the northern beaches. So, I mean, you know, you can find it anywhere. It's fantastic.
All right, just to give you a bit of an understanding of the city of Sydney, even if you've never visited Sydney, you've got the Opera House, which is in your top left-hand corner, and the Harbour Bridge, which is almost in the middle of the screen there as geographical markers. And you'll see that big clump of tall buildings behind both of those structures. That's the city centre, CBD, city, or downtown for our North American cousins. Behind that is the main campus of the University of Sydney. We have other places here and there that we have students and staff working, but the vast majority of students are on that main campus. This picture is from the other side, and the big red blocky structure at the bottom there is the university's main campus. It's large enough to be considered its own suburb. It has its own postcode. It's really a city within a city. And it's a wonderful campus in that you know when you're on campus. Some campuses bleed into the neighbourhood around them. There's this building here, that building there. Not the University of Sydney. When you're on campus, you can feel it, and you know when you go off campus. You'll see those blue boxes through and around campus signifying bus lanes. We have two major bus lanes running on two sides of the campus, and Redfern Station to get in and out. Please don't drive in Sydney. If you want a bicycle, that's fine. That's great, and an Opal card or an equivalent will get you around as comfortably as anything. All right, I enjoy the history of the university. I do. If you ever get bored, you can have a look at our crest and it'll show you the Cambridge line and the Oxford book. These two institutions helped us to establish in 1850, and we're very proud of that history. I'm not a big fan of rankings overall, but we do well in them. We would do better if we weren't such a big university, interestingly. We have to fight all battles on all fronts because we basically teach everything. And that actually makes it a lot harder for us. We would do better in rankings if we were a smaller university, interestingly enough. But that's not who we are, and we're proud of who we are. This is a picture from way back, and people are fond of saying we're the oldest university in the country, which is true, but I would also argue we're the newest university in the country. We have we're in the process of completing 3 or 4 major new buildings on campus. And it's actually a bit of a challenge for staff when asked what's the newest building on campus, because it seems to be that we're opening new ones with such monotonous regularity. My colleague here will be moving into one of the new ones as soon as they complete it. So we do have the history, but we're also pushing forward into the future. And if you're going to be doing research, that's one of the things you have to know. It is a convenient campus to work on. You can get Wi-Fi access. You have got access to all of the major journaling production systems in the world. You're not going to be wanting for facilities or for features within those facilities. It's all laid on. All right. It is an environment where you are very important salient article on an area I was studying, and looked across the corridor, and the name of the person on the article was the name of the person on the door. You do have the opportunity to be working with, studying with, interacting with people who are genuinely leading in their field, and it's quite exciting to do that. What can you study? Probably a better question is what can't you study? At this point, actuarial, optometry, marine engineering and automotive engineering are the things you can't study. Other than that, we're pretty much across the board.
Very comprehensive.
Yeah. If we don't have it, I would be surprised. Again, I'm not a big fan of rankings. Students demand that we show them. Here they are. You'll see these are global rankings. These are not national rankings. And you'll see quite a few of our faculties or areas of study in top 10, top 20, or certainly top 50 globally. And again, we have a lot of wars on a lot of fronts, and we do very well in a lot of them. I won't bore you with that any further. It is a different timeline here, not such a big issue for research students, as you can essentially apply anytime, and Sean will go into greater detail on that, but just understand that we do operate on a different time zone, timeline, I should say, an annual academic calendar. Yes, you're coming to study. Yes, research students have been known as the recluse of the student world, but I would encourage you to get out there and see stuff. It's a great way to clear your mind and help you progress through to the next stage of your research thinking and writing. You do need that downtime, you do need a break. And the great thing is, there is always something going on. I always say to students, if you're bored in Sydney, that's your fault. There's always something happening. Please take the advantage and engage where you can. Some of the criticisms you might be getting from friends and family about taking on a higher degree by research might be you're not going to get a job. This is simply not true, particularly not at the University of Sydney. We're ranked 1st in Australia and 4th in the world for graduate employability. I think number 5 on that list was Harvard. That's who we're swinging with, and we're very, very proud of that. And it gets back to that idea of, yes, we're an old institution, but yes, we're also pushing forward as we should. And that's our duty as a university to make sure that we are
Time. feel free to share this information with friends or colleagues, or if there is anything that you have any questions on, please feel free to send them through to us as we go through the remainder of the presentation. What I'd like to do for my section of the webinar is to really cover off two topics in particular. The first is to give you an overview of, I suppose, the research ecosystem or the research environment here at Sydney, the way in which we are trying to develop our community of scholars and our community of research students, and the kinds of things that we think are very important in those aspects of our mission. The other half of my part of the presentation, at least, is going to talk to you a little bit about the application and admissions process here at the university, specifically for higher degree by research. As Chris quite rightly said, we do have semesters in place, for example, which are primarily focused on coursework students, and some of the aspects of, I suppose, our admissions processes and policies are that little bit different, and I think fair to say a little bit more complicated for research students. So I think we'll take a bit of time to go through that. I'll try and give you some tips and advice on what to look out for and things to bear in mind when you're making that application. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a very good idea both of the kind of research that we're trying to do here at Sydney, but also how in fact you could get involved in that and how you could become a research student here too.
I'm just going to jump in there. We've been told by a couple of the folks who have logged in there might be some audio issues if there is an internet issue where you are or perhaps where we are. Please remember, as we said, it is recorded, so if you missed a point, don't worry too much. You can come back and look at the recording, which will not be affected by the lapse in the internet connection. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, definitely. And certainly if you do miss something, or if I'm not clear in my presentation, please again pop that through on the chat. I'm very happy to repeat any of the points that we make throughout. So this is where I always like to start with any kind of conversation about higher degree by research at the University of Sydney. And this is a quote from our Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Professor Duncan Iveson. Duncan is actually a philosopher by training, and actually quite interesting that somebody from the arts or humanities holds the position of Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, because that position really is the driving force for the direction in which the university takes its research agenda. And often I think it's fair to say that in many institutions you see scientists or engineers holding those positions. So I think it's testament to Duncan and his vision for the University of Sydney that he inhabits this role. But the reason I like to show this quote from Duncan is because I think it really encapsulates and captures our message as a university. I think the first point that Duncan makes here is that as an institution, and again, coming back to what Chris said about Sydney being a university that looks to the future and looks and thinks about innovation and new challenges, we really believe that it is our mission and it is our job to do the very best research possible. That's what we are here to do. And it's to share that knowledge that we create within that research with the next generation of students and the next generation of researchers. And I think the second point that we can take from Duncan's comment really is about Sydney, I suppose, respects and appreciates the value of research in its entirety. And because of that, we are investing in our research, we are investing in our researchers, both our early career academics, but also our higher degree by research students. And that's something I want to tease out during this morning's presentation in particular. Much like Chris, I hate talking about rankings, but certainly I think it's important for you as prospective research students, not necessarily undergraduate or postgraduate coursework students, but as research students, to recognize where Sydney sits internationally in a range of, I suppose, rankings that are relevant to you as prospective HDR or candidates. The first one there, I think the Leiden rankings is something that certainly I'm very proud of, and I know many of our colleagues here at the University of Sydney are very proud of, because it speaks to Sydney's ability to complete and undertake research that has a genuine impact. And that's something that if you click around our web pages, if you review our research areas and our research teams here at the university, a major driver of the research we do is to in fact have impactful research. And that means we want to undertake research that's going to have an influence on people's lives that's going to shape the economy, that's going to shape our understanding of society, that's going to question cultural norms and so on. And really to be doing that in a way that is new and innovative. And I think Sydney, again, is a place where we really train our students to think in that kind of manner, and to understand that it is important to recognize that doing research is important and good in its own right, but as well, we want you to do research that you can actually apply to real world problems and actually help solve problems internationally. What's very important, I think, about Sydney and its position as an impact is that as we have moved into the 21st century, funding bodies, state governments, universities themselves have consistently asked researchers to really prove their worth, to say, why is it that we should support you? Why is it that we should provide you with funding to go and do this research? And in all of those kinds of applications for scholarship, for early career research funding, for very advanced funding with the Australian Research Council, impact is a vital factor. So certainly I think it's very important when you are considering the university that you want to come and visit and work in as a research student, to ensure that that university can actually train you to be impactful. And I think Sydney is a place that can do that. On top of that, I think Sydney is obviously recognised internationally as being a very innovative university. And I speak to a lot of research students over the course of each academic year, and particularly prospective research students. And I ask them, what is it to do research? Why do you want to do research? Why do you want to be a research student? And they say, oh, it's exactly what I want to do. And we ask them, what is research? And they say, I'm not really sure. Research, in essence, is the creation of new knowledge. And that's, a driving aspiration of the university. But to create new knowledge, you have to think about things in a new way. And again, I think that recognition of Sydney being an innovative, forward-thinking, modern, comprehensive research institution is very, very important. And I will refer, obviously, to that ranking that Chris mentioned as well, in terms of our consistent ranking very, very highly internationally in terms of the employability ranking of our graduates. I think this sometimes when I speak to research students sometimes gets pushed aside. Because certainly for undergraduate candidates, this is the first thing they ask. When I go and get a degree, am I going to be able to get a job afterwards? Dare it be said that our research students would also like to be employed after they finish their degree too. We really think that is an important aspect of the way in which we train our researchers here at Sydney. And we are really moving towards a model of research training that certainly will prepare students to proceed in research fields, to proceed in academia, for example, but also we really hope that the qualities and the innate abilities that we will I suppose, enable you with while you're a research student at Sydney will actually allow you to really branch off into many, many different directions. But crucially, with the weight of a research degree from the University of Sydney behind you. I did mention already that something that we've been trying to do as part of our current strategic plan has been to really increase investment in our research activity here at the university. So between 2016 and 2020, which is the length of our current strategic plan at the university, we've actually tripled our investment in research. That has actually been, I suppose, represented in many respects, as Chris mentioned, with the development of new facilities, the building of new structures here on campus to ensure that people have the facilities to do the very best research they can. But it has also been coupled with, I suppose, investment in research funding, for example. And that's certainly true of scholarships here at the university for our research students, but also a range of early career research funding models and programs such as the SOAR fellowships, the Sydney Society of Fellows, and so on, that can ensure students when they graduate to have an opportunity to stay here at Sydney and to continue their research. And that's something that's very important to us because we recognize that if we train really great researchers, we don't want them to go somewhere else. We want them to stay here to keep working in their areas and in their fields and become both nationally and internationally renowned in that respect. 100% of the research done here at the university, and that includes the research done by our higher degree by research students, And please, when I talk about the research that we are doing, please do recognize that at Sydney, we understand that really the driving force of so much of the research that goes on here is actually done by research students at the university. They are the powerhouse of the research production in many respects at the university. But 100% of that research is ranked at world standard or above. And that's within the Research for Australia a survey undertaken every couple of years by the Australian government. And it's something that Sydney consistently performs very, very well in. And I think another important factor of the kind of research environment and culture that we are trying to establish at the university is our investment in research institutes. So research institutes are places where, in many respects, colleagues from many, many different faculties, many different discipline areas can come together and work on a range of topics or major questions within their field. Sydney now has over 90, I think we're actually touching about 100 research institutes at the university now. And they range in size and shape. Places like the Charles Perkins Centre, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, is very much a multidisciplinary research institute that brings together people from lots of different backgrounds and lots of different areas working on big global issues. And then we have smaller institutes. There's places like the Sydney Nano Institute, although I don't think the colleagues there would consider themselves too small. They're quite an internationally renowned institute for the study of nanoscience. We have people from, for example, the Faculty of Pharmacy working at Sydney Nano. But we have got a range of smaller institutes that work then with research students and with researchers on particular topics of focus and topics of research as well. So I think what that represents for Sydney as an institution is this move towards a multidisciplinary, integrated research environment. We do not want you as a researcher at Sydney to be confined or to be siloed or if you feel sealed off from other people working across different disciplines, because we really genuinely believe that the future of research is about bringing the best people together in different disciplines and having different ideas and different ways to tackle major problems. And that is something that Sydney is doing very, very well. I've had the opportunity to work at institutions in Europe, in North America, and I think everybody says we are interdisciplinary, we are multidisciplinary. You'll see that on everybody's website, anywhere you go. But in many respects, I really do feel the University of Sydney is putting its money where its mouth is and investing in that kind of research culture, which is important for research students. So as we've mentioned, we are first in Australia and very well ranked globally in terms for our research impact and collaboration. We really are hoping to continue our drive to begin to engage more with industry and community partners, both in Australia and internationally, and that's something that the university is really seeking to develop, to give our research students the opportunity to do real-world projects, to work with industry partners who have identified areas that they want them to work on. We have over 160 years of experience in this field, and I think as a research student, that's not to be sniffed at, because if you are trying to open up international collaborations, if you're trying to build your network internationally as a research student, having the weight of the University of Sydney name behind you and the recognition that that brings is vitally important. And we'll also work with you because our own network as an institution spans the globe. We have over 300 international partners. That's both university and industry partners. So very much that is something that we hope you will have the chance to do while you're here, but with meeting with our own colleagues and other students on campus, but also by giving you opportunity to attend conferences, to engage with other research groups or labs at other institutions internationally is something that's very, very important to us. I did mention the Charles Perkins Centre, and I like to talk about the CPC as we call it here on campus very, very briefly, because I think it encapsulates much of what Sydney is trying to achieve as we make our way into the 21st century, as I said. CPC was a major investment on behalf of the university, approximately 300 million Australian dollars of an investment, so not insignificant. And the reason I think it encapsulates a lot of what we are trying to do is because until the establishment of the CPC, it didn't exist, both physically but also theoretically in terms of the research that it was going to undertake. So the university decided to establish this major research institute. We built a brand new building to house it. And we brought academics and researchers from so many different parts of the university together to tackle major problems in kind of global health endemics, for example, things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. These are the things that these people at the CPC are working on. And while they have a health focus in their, I suppose, in their research endeavors, what is really exciting about the CPC is that it brings together architects, scientists, and clinicians. So we feel this is not just the domain of doctors or those working in the health sciences. We want to bring together people from every aspect of the university life and ensure that they have that opportunity to communicate, to integrate, and to answer these questions and tackle these major global problems in that multidisciplinary way. So as I mentioned, I think that really does showcase the way in which we think about research, but also that kind of investment and that forward-looking mentality that the university has in terms of the CPC. So if any of that sounds engaging, if any of that sounds exciting, we hope you do feel that Sydney is a place where you can advance your own research agenda. As you'll see there, we believe our research is multidisciplinary, we believe it's collaborative. We've wanted to be engaged, we wanted to be understanding what's going on in the world and how can we actually make a difference in that way. And following on from that, then we want people to do impactful research. And that's something that we think is very, very important for research students to get ahead in and to understand that the research world, as it has become more globalized, has become more competitive. And certainly you need to be aware and able to ensure that you do impactful, meaningful research. And we think somewhere like Sydney will help you to do that. So as I mentioned, if that sounds exciting, if that sounds like something you would like to do, I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes now talking about the application and admissions process. I'm just having a look. I know there's some questions coming in. Perfect. Okay, so there's a couple of questions coming in that, in fact, I think we will actually cover off in the next section of the presentation. And again, but if we don't, of course, by the time we get to the end, we have plenty of time for questions as well. The next section will probably only take 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions from you guys as well. So in terms of application, I think really what's important, many of you will probably be very aware, very familiar with making application to what we would refer to as coursework programs, either as undergraduates or indeed as postgraduates taking on master's programs, graduates diplomas, and so on. When you are making an application to a research degree, in some respects, we think you have to kind of start thinking a little bit differently about how you're making that application. Because in the coursework context, many universities will present a course of study to you. We will say, this is what we offer. We will square it off. It will be very obvious and very clear to you as a student what is available. And then you can make your application to that course if that's what sounds exciting. With research degrees, we do that to a certain extent, but at the same time, as a research student, we want you engaging with a research idea and a research project that you have a genuine passion and interest in pursuing. So it's very important that you think about your degree and you think about your program and an area of research in advance of making application to the university. So these kinds of steps that I'd like to talk through today will give you some tips about doing that and will help you understand the admission process here at Sydney, I think, that little bit better. In that vein, I'm primarily going to talk about the first 3 steps and briefly touch on step 4, because once you get to that point, there's not much else you can do as an applicant. It's over to us to assess your application and hopefully, if you are successful, to offer you a position here at Sydney and then to help you enroll. So steps 1 to 3 are vitally important for you to understand and to be aware of. And then the remaining steps are very much a process-driven steps that will allow you to, which you can do primarily through our website. I should say at the very, very beginning that all applications to research degrees are made directly through the University of Sydney website. So whether you're applying from here in Australia, or I know we have a lot of people online from the Americas, for example, you will be applying directly through our application website on the university website. So the first step in any course selection in any university decision-making process, obviously, is to consider 2 things. What degree do I want to study? And do I qualify for that program? What we have listed there is primarily, I think, the major research degrees that we have here at the University of Sydney. I think what's very important, if you are coming from other areas or other parts of the world, particularly it's really important to recognise the time that we expect students to undertake their research degrees here at the university. Our MPhils or our Masters by Research in many respects are stepping stones for many students to something like a PhD. They can take between 1 and 2 years. For many students, 1.5 years is the time that they use to undertake those degree programs. As you will see, our eligibility requirements there often require a bachelor degree program. And some faculties will ask that you can show that you already have some research experience, usually as part of an undergraduate degree. However, some faculties, like the Faculty of Science, if you have a very strong bachelor degree, may allow you to enroll in the MPhil without that previous research experience, but you really would need to be getting distinction grades within your bachelor program to have the chance to progress into that pathway. Our Doctor of Philosophy or our PhD degree obviously is I suppose our quintessential research degree here at Sydney. It is the highest ranked qualification on the Australian framework of qualifications and is recognised internationally as really being at the pinnacle of university study in many respects. Again, I would advise you to take a quick look at the duration of that degree program. For most students, it's 3.5 years, possibly with an extension to 4 years if circumstances allow. And really, again, the reason for that, I suppose, shortened degree program, if you were comparing it to somewhere like the United States, is because this is a research degree at Sydney. We do not expect you to come here and spend 7 years undertaking a PhD. We actually want you to come straight in and engage directly with your research project from day one, which is a very different model in many respects to a lot of what our colleagues in universities in the US would offer. So certainly I think that is appealing to many international students. You can get a PhD in often half the time it would take you to do so in a US institution here in Australia. So I think that's something worth considering. What is vitally important for admission to the PhD programs, and I must say all admission to our research degrees is competitive here at Sydney, but vitally important is that for admission to our PhD programs, you must have previous research experience. Now that can be represented within your educational and academic transcripts, for example, primarily through an honours project, maybe in the final year of your undergraduate degree, for example, or possibly maybe an MPhil or a master's program that enabled you to undertake some research during that coursework master's program. But admission to the PhD does require previous research experience. That can also be represented, however, by students who maybe are returning from work, from a professional role, for example, where they undertook research activity as part of that role. Now that discussion happens very much at a faculty level and initially with your supervisor, and they will need to make that academic decision to really understand whether or not you have enough research experience to commence in the PhD straight away. And that's a conversation you would have with prospective supervisors and with the faculty before making your application. Our professional doctorates are a little bit different. They're only offered across certain faculties here at the university. They are to the same level of a PhD, and I suppose students who undertake professional doctorates must be able to show that they can actually apply the research that they're doing to a kind of work-based scenario. So often, I think it's fair to say, professional doctorates are not necessarily the pathway for international students because it can be hard to, I suppose, connect that work-based scenario with the professional doctorate research that you would need to undertake at the University of Sydney. And in most instances, those looking for doctoral study here at the university, particularly from international students' cases, will be looking at the PhD. Our honours degree then, very briefly, is a one-year program. It sits kind of between an undergraduate degree and a postgraduate degree. What is great about it, the honours year here at Sydney, and it's offered across many, many faculties, is it is a pathway directly to PhD. So if you find that you're looking at the eligibility requirements, you don't quite meet them primarily based on the fact that you don't have that research experience for PhD, an honours year is an option. So I would encourage you to review that are available. They're all listed on our website, and you can see what faculties offer you an honours option, which can, as I say, be a pathway to PhD. And I just have a brief slide there just to show you some of the steps to ultimately get into that Doctor of Philosophy point, if that is your end goal.
Just had a question come through,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a good question, one
Mm-hmm.
we get quite a lot. If I do not meet the English proficiency requirements, how can I prepare myself for higher degree research at
Sure,
the university?
sure. I think the first response to that question is that if you don't meet the requirements, you have to meet them before you're going to gain admission. So for many of our research degrees, an IELTS score of 6.5 with no less than 6 in each band is required. Some faculties do, however, look for an overall of a 7 in IELTS, and I suppose the representative marks in the other English language qualifications are also accepted. So you can make an application to a research degree here at the university without meeting your English language requirements, and we can issue conditional offers in that regard. But I think ultimately, to get an unconditional offer to the university, you must meet that requirement.
So there's CET, there's...
So yes, feel free.
Oh, there's also a Centre for English Teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel that you haven't got the English there and you've got an IELTS score that's a bit lower, you can talk to CET even before you come, and they can package a program for you, and they're extremely good at what they do. They know how much study you're going to need on average, and you can work through the CET program to get your English up to speed before you hit the ground running here. Some students think that maybe we're a bit mean, we're keeping students out, yada, yada. We have a duty of care to students, and we do not ever want to place a student in a position where they're going to fail. That's unfair. That would be an unfair requirement that we would have on the student. So we've got CET on campus here. These guys are the best in Australia. They really are. They will know what you need to study and how to get your language skills up to where they need to be before you embark on what is a very difficult course of study, and be well prepared to be successful.
And I would agree with Chris on that. Certainly, obviously, meeting English language requirements for all of our courses here at Sydney is vitally important, because we want you to have a positive experience. But when you think about a research degree, in many respects, this is you're driving the agenda in this program. It's your research. Certainly, you'll have the support of your supervisor, of the research team who will be working with you. But really, you need to have those language skills up to the mark that we require, to ensure not only that you can actually undertake the research, but that you can do so in a positive manner and an engaged manner. And we want you to have probably the best experience that you can have. So it is vitally important to keep that in mind. And I think that's a really good question to address at this point. So step 2 of the 3 I want to talk about is about developing your research idea. And this is where I mentioned earlier, where we come back to that idea that in many respects, a research program asks you as the potential research student, what is it that you have a passion about? What is it that you are interested in studying? And for many students, that's often something that they've kind of developed an interest in at an undergraduate or a master's level, and they want to progress that idea. Again, it's about creating new knowledge. So you might say, well, I've got an idea about work that someone else has done, and I want to build on that. I want to expand on that. Or, vitally important, I disagree. I don't think that their way of looking at this is actually the right way of doing things, and my project is going to question that. What's very important for many of our applications to many of our faculties here is that in advance then of making your application, and in advance of engaging a prospective supervisor, which is a vital step in the one I'm going to come to next, you must prepare an initial research proposal. That's not necessarily the case for our business school, and there is a couple of different steps for our law school, but for the vast majority of our research programs, you do need to prepare an initial research proposal. And even for those areas that do not ask you to submit an initial research proposal in advance, really our advice to you is, if you are going to undertake a research degree, it's vitally important that you do a bit of research in advance. You think about, what is it that I want to look at, what is it I want to study, and what is it I want to engage with for 3 to 4 years, because this is going to be a real labour of love, and you're going to have to be really engaged with it. So developing that initial research proposal is very important. And what's really great is we have a fantastic resource on our website on how to develop a research proposal for the university. We're talking probably about 1,500 to 2,000 words. And what's really important in that respect is that this is not the final project. This is not us asking you to decide what will the project look like, and indeed what will the answers be to the questions I'm going to look at. That's not what we're asking you to do. We are asking you to show to us that you have ideas, that you are interested in this particular topic, and that you've got enough experience in that field to enable you to engage with it in a meaningful and productive manner. And as I mentioned there in that important note, for most courses, before you can engage with our supervisors and before you can make an application, you will need to prepare that research proposal, and you will need a supervisor to support that proposal. Once you've done that, the supervisor then will work with you and will allow you to kind of decide upon what the final project will look like. Even at that point, the initial research proposal probably will change. And even during your research degree, questions that you're asking, the direction of the research is also going to change. Because if we knew the answers at the beginning of this process, we wouldn't need to undertake the research in the first place. So that is the nature of research. It is it's agile, it's organic in how it works. And that's something that you should be excited about and able to do. But preparing that initial research proposal is really, really important. The next step then, once you have a proposal in mind, is about finding a supervisor. And I think when I speak to students, they often think that they almost have to get down on bended knee in front of a supervisor and beg for them to take them on. This is a two-way relationship. And I think that's very important for you as a prospective student to understand. We want you to work with someone with whom you are compatible, but also someone who actually is genuinely interested in your research. And it's very important that you're working with a supervisor who wants to invest time and energy in you and in the project that you're undertaking. So it's completely fine for you to ask questions of a prospective supervisor, to engage with them, and to think about things like their professional reputation, like the ability to network with other researchers in your field. Does that supervisor, for example, provide funding to go to attend conferences, for example? Are they someone who encourages you to complete your degree, or would they like you to also maybe think about publications during the time that you're here at Sydney? So asking these questions is very, very important. And I think that's really relevant for students when they're making their application and when they're beginning those conversations with supervisors. Very, very importantly, I think something that students sometimes forget to do, they do really great work in preparing a research proposal. They really work hard on ensuring that their project looks really good and appealing to a prospective supervisor. But sometimes where we see students falling down is that they in no way show the collaboration or the connectivity between their project and the work that their supervisor is doing here at Sydney. If you take nothing else from this presentation today, that point would be one I would encourage you to think about. When you begin to engage with our academic colleagues here at Sydney, when you're sending them emails, sending them research proposals and so on, ensure that you show why your research and their research is aligned. You don't have to work on exactly the same thing, but you do have to show that there's some connection between what you're doing and what they're doing. Because again, much like the English language question that we had, we want you to come here and do the best research possible. If we as an institution do not have the expertise to support your project, then maybe we're not the right place for you. And I think it's completely fair to say that. So what's really, really important is for you to think about how does your research align with the work that's going on here at Sydney and with the supervisors that you want to work with. So engaging with supervisors, you can contact them directly. We also have a Find a Researcher database online. There are expression of interest processes for law, business, and actually medicine has recently just changed their process. So that's something to have a look at. But you will see that information on our Sydney courses pages. And there is also Research Supervisor Connect. In any shape, way, or form in how you're engaging with supervisors, we always encourage a student to provide an initial research proposal, provide your academic transcripts, and also a CV or a resume, just to show your progression and why you think you want to engage with this particular research project and with this particular supervisor. As you've sat through this presentation today, we would really encourage you to directly engage with supervisors. You can find a whole range of research topics and people who are working on them on our website, both on our faculty websites, but also on our Research Institute website as well. And you'll see people who are working through different topics that are relevant to you. That Find a Researcher database, which I mentioned, is also vitally important because it allows you to search by keyword, research team, people's names, and so on. And that will allow you to undertake a real good opportunity to review who's available in your particular area. And once you have found someone, please read their work. Again, something we hear from students quite regularly is, I have found the very, very best researcher, the very best professor I want to work with. They are brilliant, they're for me. And I say, have you read anything they've written? And the student says, no, never. That's really something that you need to do. You need to read what they're writing about. Where are they in their thought process, in their ideas and in their concepts on the field? So that's the Find a Researcher database that you can have a look at on our website. Simply search Find a Researcher, University of Sydney, through any search engine, and that will pop up. And then ultimately, when you have the support of a supervisor, you can then make your application. You make your application directly to the university website, as I mentioned. There'll be a range of material that we actually want from you. But once you get to this point with the support of a supervisor, you're actually 90% of the way towards making your application. This part of the process is very straightforward. It's very process driven. You simply look on the website, provide the information that we require, provide evidence, for example, that the supervisor had said they will support you, which can just be an email. And that part of the process takes a very quick amount of time. Once your application is with us, we do try to turn those applications around in about 4 to 6 weeks. So that's an opportunity to get your application in and assessed relatively quickly. Applications for admissions and scholarships are open all year round for many courses, but I do encourage you to check that in case there are any closing dates for particular courses or particular schools or faculty. Again, the business school sometimes has some closing dates if you wish to be considered for a particular scholarship. So again, it's important to review at the time you're making your application, are there any closing dates I need to be aware of? Apply as far in advance as possible. And there is often an opportunity to commence at a number of different research periods throughout the year. We have 4 research periods here at Sydney. They are roughly divided on the quarter of the year, although some are longer than others. And again, certain faculties will advise you that they would rather you start at this time or possibly at this time, for example. So you'll have that conversation with a supervisor and they will make the assessment of when's best to start. A very, very brief introduction to scholarships. At Sydney, all our scholarships are competitive. That's the simple fact, and they are based primarily on academic merit and your abilities as represented in your academic transcripts and so on. In our research scholarships as well, the faculties do try, and our scholarships committee do try to assess the potential of the research project as well. But that potential will never outweigh a really high-ranking student in terms of a top grade from their undergraduate or master's degree. That really is vitally important, and it's important to be aware of that. There are a range of funding options available to international students. There are the Research Training Programme scholarships, which are provided by the Australian government. They are open to international students. Then there are a layer of scholarships offered by the University of Sydney. To apply for those, you simply do it as part of your admission application. And then there are some faculty scholarships. The faculty scholarships are very important. And it's very hard for us actually to get into detail about those because they are often for very specific research areas. So once you've decided on your area of research and the faculty that you want to work in, I really encourage you to get onto the website and see if there are any scholarships that apply to your particular case, because they are very much focused on particular areas of research, particular lab groups, particular research groups, and so on. So you really do need to spend a little bit of time seeing what's available and seeing if they're available to you as well. As I mentioned, highly competitive, and decisions are made on merit. That is how we make our decisions for our scholarships here. I've given you just a brief overview of some of the minimum selection criteria in many respects, and I think it is important to bear those in mind when making an application to scholarship. The vital point for you to understand in terms of that application is currently, certainly for the RTP, the Research Training Programme scholarships, and the university scholarships, is you make that application at the time of your admission application. So please ensure that you include any details that are relevant for scholarship application at the time of your admission application. Many students come to me afterwards and they say, I gained admission, and you can gain admission without a scholarship, but I didn't get a scholarship. However, I have 3 publications that I never included in my application, and those publications would have been really helpful in allowing the scholarship committee to make an assessment. So include anything in your application that you think is relevant, and if it's not relevant, we'll discard it. It won't hinder your application in any way. So please do ensure that you really put your best foot forward and showcase your ability as a potential research student here at Sydney. So I think we're just come to the end of that session, and we have lots of questions I can see popping up.
We'll jump into those. How does the English requirement result affect your scholarships selection process?
Sure.
Can I jump into that one?
You can. Yeah.
Look, it's a hurdle. Once you get over the minimum requirement, you'll be assessed. Whether you're a lot above it or a little bit above it, it really doesn't make any difference as far as I've ever seen with a student apply. As long as you meet that minimum requirement, we're confident that you can undertake that study. So don't worry too much whether maybe another student has a slightly higher IELTS score than you. It's not going to be very impactful. As Sean was saying, the real impact is what's the research that you have done before. Show us the money when it comes to the research that you've done, and that's what's going to hold you in good stead. Now, Morgan has quite a long question here. If you don't receive a scholarship from the university, what are your other options in getting financial support during the time of your PhD? Coming from the US, stipends are usually included during the time of your PhD.
So I think there's two, this is an excellent question, by the way, and I think there's two parts to it. Chris, you might be able to comment specifically on some US funding options, but what I'll do is I'll just give you a quick response to that, Morgan. You're completely right that in some jurisdictions, in some countries, in some systems, PhD students are not accepted unless they have funding. That is not the case here in Australia, and it's not the case here at the University of Sydney. We operate very similar to a lot of institutions in Europe, for example. Ireland and the UK will be very similar in this regard. So you can gain admission to the university without receiving a university scholarship. That said, that does not rule out any other opportunities that you might have as an applicant to apply to other funding agencies, whether that's in your home country, whether that's international funding agencies, maybe that might be industry sponsorship, and so on. We as an institution are usually very, very happy to accept funding from whatever area that you can secure it. I suppose there are some obviously basic considerations. As a research student, while we consider research students working full time, you often have more control over your study periods and when you're going to be putting the time in research. So it is an option to work as an international student, even when you're undertaking a research degree. So that's a way of funding yourself for sure. But obviously we want our students to be able to dedicate their time to their research. So I think your decision will come down to if you are successful in being submitted and you are not successful in winning a scholarship, your decision comes down to, well, what are the means available to me as a candidate in my specific situation to make my way through this degree program? And maybe that is to hold maybe a part-time job, for example, or to apply to other funding agencies. And I know, Chris, you have quite a detailed view of some of those within the US in particular.
Sure. To add to that, the American perspective is you go to the institution and the institution will somehow find the money for you. It's a very inward-looking system. In Australia, you tend to have more of a broader view. You're going to go to places like Rotary. You're going to go to other funding bodies and get support for your research. We have a few students on GI Bill funding. The American government is very generous in that way. And don't think that you can't bring that money with you. Most of those funds are transportable across international borders. And again, in the United States, you can only, if you are wanting to work part-time, you can only work on the campus where you are studying. In Australia, when you come here as a student and the duration is more than 1 year and a couple of other bits and pieces, your student visa is a work visa. You can go and work wherever you like and do whatever you want to fund your studies. So my advice there, Morgan, is to think more broadly and take in the peripheral vision of where that funding might come from. I would love to say that there was a single website, you could go to it and put your details in, and spit all the options out for you. It simply, as far as I've ever seen, doesn't exist. To students is you're going to have to wear out a fair bit of digital shoe leather running around and looking at where these options are. The money is there. Every year there are scholarship bodies that don't give out all of their funding. One of them in the United States I'd highly recommend you having a look at is the American Australian Association. Former Ambassador John Berry, he's head of that program in New York, and I know that they have scholarship money each year that they don't give out. And that's a very specific one for Americans coming to Australia and vice versa, but the research does have to be in a particular area. So The good news is that at the PhD level, there is more funding available for a smaller number of students. At the graduate level, there's a smaller amount of funding for a huge amount of students. So on average, at the PhD level, you will have more opportunities to find that funding, but it is a bit of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to go and make sure that you find that money. Now, Mohammed has another question. How long does it take to get a scholarship decision? Is it possible to track the application process? I got an unconditional offer in the School of Medicine.
Excellent. Well, first of all, congratulations.
Indeed.
A hugely competitive process and a very competitive faculty to be admitted to. So congratulations, Mohammed, on that unconditional offer. The scholarship process is usually undertaken on a monthly basis. Our scholarship committee meets on a rolling basis once a month. And they try as quickly as possible to turn around all scholarship applications. I think what's important to recognize is obviously they are assessing scholarships, not just for within your program, but for students applying to many of our research degrees. So the simple answer to your question is no, it's not possible to track it, but I can assure you that we will turn that application around as soon as possible and we will make a decision as to whether or not you will be successful in being awarded a scholarship.
Look, that's great news. There's some useful links up on the page now. Make sure you get a screenshot of that. I'll leave it up there just for a minute. But again, you can just click in and get the whole presentation when it goes up online, which will be in a little while. But do remember the presentations are only up for a period of time. All information at universities is now perishable and the longevity of it is relatively short. So we make sure that we're not leaving stuff up too long because things are constantly changing. There are some upcoming webinars. We mentioned these at the beginning, but a few people logged in afterwards. I know you can't clap, and it's a bit of an odd situation, but I would like you to thank Dr. O'Reilly for being here, at least in your mind. And again, thank you for your time in tuning in and spending an hour with us. And again, if you've got further questions, you know how to contact us, and we'll be looking forward to receiving your responses. Thanks again, guys.
Great. Thanks very much, folks.
Cheers.